Hi, and welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Family Life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Laura Boycourt. Today, we'll be talking about body image, a healthy body image and how it can be disturbed, the media's effect on body image, and what parents can do to help their children love their own bodies. And joining us today is Dr. Renee Engeln, professor of psychology at Northwestern University and author of Beauty Sick, How the Cultural Obsession with Appearance Hurts Girls and Women. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So can we start with your background, maybe what drew you initially to psychology and specifically to work on issues of body image?
Well, I always tell people, I think I knew I wanted to be a psychologist since I was very young, when one of my favorite things to do was write surveys and give them to my friends.
Oh, okay, there we go.
So even before I knew what a psychologist was, I always wanted to know what people were up to, what they were thinking, and I've always liked research. So I think that's always been a part of me. But what drew me to studying body image was actually teaching. When I started teaching college age students, or I should say traditional college age students, so 18 to 22-year-olds, what you quickly see is, confirmation that this is a risky age period, particularly for women, and that a lot of them were having some pretty serious struggles with body image. And I was sort of young enough and naive enough at the time to think that I could really figure this out and maybe do something to change things, because I just cared about my students so much and I didn't want to see them suffering.
Wow, that's wonderful to hear. Well, that's a perfect segue for my next question. Fast forward all those years ahead, and here you are, you run the Body and Media Lab at Northwestern. So could you tell us a little bit about your focus, what you do there?
Well, mostly what I do in the Body and Media Lab is get to spend time with 9 or 10 super smart, super ambitious, and caring students who are really into this topic and really into research. And so it's basically a joy to work with them as we use the tools of science to ask interesting questions about body image and how it's influenced by cultural and media forces. And so mostly what we do is design studies and collect data and run them and just try to see what we can learn about this topic.
So in a way, you've come full circle from the quizzes that you loved to do in your younger days to this, and this is such an important, vital topic to understand. So I'm so glad that this is where it's your life's path has taken you. So can we define body image? Maybe some of us have a decent understanding, but what is body image and what is a healthy body image?
Those are good questions. I think we use that term a lot, maybe without thinking about really what it means. And I think most people, when they hear body image, they think, well, your body image is good if you just think you look good all the time. And that's not really what it is. If that were the definition, nobody would have a healthy body image. So there are different components to body image. It's how you feel about your body. It's the kind of thoughts you have about your body. And then it also encompasses behaviors too. How do you take care of your body? How do you treat your body? How much time do you invest in different elements, related to your body? So it's a complex construct that's more than just, do I like what I see when I look in the mirror? And so a healthy body image doesn't have to be feeling hot, sexy, beautiful, pretty, whatever all the time, right? That's not what it is. But it's about the ability to mostly, treat your body with kindness, to have kind thoughts about your body, to be able to accept your body, even if it's not exactly what you want it to be, or even if it doesn't look how you want it to look. And it's about making choices that nurture your body, that don't, punish your body or constantly try to turn it into something that, is going to require a lot of pain or emotional energy on your part. So it's really about learning to live in your body in a comfortable way.
Okay, that's well said. That kind of sets the stage for the rest of our discussion. So we've outlined what body image is and what a healthy body image, ideally looks like. When and how might someone's body image be threatened? And I know this is a loaded question with lots of answers, but I'm guessing there's, fairly strong tie-ins to social media, culture, expectations, norms, stereotypes. So where can things go wrong in terms of
Oh,
one's body image?
I wish I had a happier answer
I
for
know,
this,
I
right?
know.
If you look at little kids, basically they tend to come in the world liking their bodies, right? They think their bodies are fun. They think their bodies are interesting. They like to explore with their bodies. They don't worry if their little stomachs are sticking out, they like that. But something happens along the way that makes a lot of people start to hate their bodies. And it's never a simple answer. It's never just one thing. But we certainly know what some of the major forces are. One of them, basically we summarize this in research as parents, peers, media, right?
Okay.
So it often starts with parents and the messages children hear about their own bodies, but also what they hear their parents saying about other people's bodies,
Okay.
about their parents' bodies themselves. So some parents will say, well, I never, told my kids anything but how wonderful and perfect they are. But if as the parent, you're also talking about how horrible or ugly you look, or how much you need to lose weight or diet or change your body, kids hear that, right? They get the message that some bodies are okay and some bodies are not okay, and that it's really important to have an okay body. So you can pick up on a lot of negative body image messages from parents. I should say it also counts for parents who are always criticizing other people's bodies.
Okay.
Right? That's really something to try to avoid too. It's mean for one, but also it sort of teaches your kids that you just never know who's going to be looking at your body, evaluating your body, talking about your body. It's not a great lesson. Peers absolutely play a role, especially as children get older, as they move, a little closer to adolescence. So if you're in a peer group that is body obsessed and appearance obsessed, it's really easy to get pulled along with that. If it's a group that does a lot of what we call negative body talk, where they do a lot of like, oh, I don't look good today, I wish I looked like you, right? That sort of thing. And then when we talk about media, when I started in this field, that meant, fashion magazines. That was the big villain,
it's
right?
changed.
Vogue and Cosmo.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, Vogue and Cosmo seem so harmless compared to what's out there now. So of course, media have a big impact, and in ways that are obvious. Like if you're always looking at images of perfected bodies, it's hard not to compare yourself to that and feel like you're falling short. But in more subtle ways too, right? A lot of messages we get on media just reinforce the idea that how you look is the most important part of you, right? Or they reinforce what we would call diet culture, this idea that you should always be watching your weight, always be trying to be thinner. But social media can also just make you feel like you have to perform all the time, right? Like your body is on display all the time. And these are not healthy things to be having to obsess with, especially as you move into adolescence. Adolescents are already, living in a space where they tend to have what researchers call an imaginary audience. Like, I don't know if you have an adolescent, but
almost we're getting there.
So you maybe
we are on the cusp of it.
Yeah, like teens tend to think everyone's thinking about them and looking at them, and they kind of think that's happening all the time. And then the worst thing social media does is makes that happen, right? It makes it so that people are commenting, about you and looking at you. And so the more you can give your kids a break from that, the better off you'll be. I should also say that some kids just have difficult temperaments. Right? They came into the world, with brains that are going to be more easily bumped into feeling bad. And if that's your temperament, then your body can just become one more thing to feel bad about. So sometimes it's not even necessarily anything particular that happened in your environment. It could be that, you have a difficult temperament, and when you feel bad, that's where the feeling bad goes.
Sure, that makes sense. Are there certain groups of individuals, whether it's ages, gender identities, orientations, anything, certain groups, individuals who appear to maybe have higher rates of body image disturbance, as you put it in your book? And if so, why? What are the underlying reasons for that?
That's a good question. I get this question all the time because my work focuses pretty exclusively on girls and women. And people will say like, well, what about men? What about everything else? And of course, any gender, any age can struggle with body image concerns. Girls and women are at elevated risk. I sometimes have people argue with me about that, and I think the evidence is so overwhelming.
Sure.
All you have to do is look at plastic surgery rates, and when you can explain to me why 90-some% of plastic surgeries and cosmetic procedures are done on women, but that doesn't reflect a body image disparity, we can talk. But there are other groups that are vulnerable too. So adolescence is a sort of critical period, and even I'd say pre-adolescence, even the tween years you're heading in there, that can be a really vulnerable period for young people. We also know that gender minorities and sexual minorities seem to be at increased risk. So LGBTQ individuals can show elevated body image disturbance, and they can also show more risk for eating disordered behavior and other kind of worrisome behaviors around eating, like the use of diet pills, for example, or compulsive exercise. There's more and more evidence coming out now that young people who live with food insecurity are also at increased risk for eating disordered behavior and body image struggles. And that's counterintuitive to a lot of people, but I think it actually makes sense, right? It's hard to have a healthy relationship with food and eating in your body when you don't have a stable place to work from, when you don't know what's going to happen with your next meal. So there are a lot of groups that are at increased risk.
Okay. Thanks for answering that, because I know that's, we'll get into your book in a couple of minutes, but that was something I definitely wanted to touch on. I'm going to pull a couple quotes from your book, Beauty Sick, just that stuck with me. So I know you've heard this before, but one of the first ones, you write, after researching women's battles with beauty for years, I can confidently tell you that girls and women who struggle to feel at home in their bodies are not some odd subculture of America. They are our daughters, our sisters, our students, our friends, our partners, and our loved ones. And then you follow that with, beauty sickness is what happens when women's emotional energy gets so bound up with what they see in the mirror that it becomes harder for them to see other aspects of their lives. So thinking of all of that, keeping that in mind, what are some manifestations of this beauty sickness? Why for women, other individuals, and I know we've gone into this a little bit, the causes, media, sort of peer-to-peer interactions, things like that. But this beauty sickness you talk about, can you sort of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I always feel like I should first say there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good. Everybody wants to look nice. I brushed my hair before we did this, right? Like this is a norm. So like beauty sickness is not, when I say that, I'm not saying that anyone who cares about how they look is sick. What I'm saying is I've talked to too many girls and women where their concerns about their appearance have just overtaken their life, and where those concerns are taking really precious resources from them, their time, their money, their emotional energy, their concentration. And so for me, beauty sickness is what happens when beauty is in concerns about beauty are sucking up all the energy in your life, right? And they're moving you farther from your values because they leave you less to work with when it comes to things that matter more to you than how you look. And I also want to say, when I say beauty sick, it sounds like, oh, something's wrong with you. You're beauty sick.
No, but not at all. I understand. Yeah.
It's in the culture, right? It's the water we're swimming in. I had one interview participant say to me, like, you have to play the game. You have to play the game, right? Like even if you don't want to play this game, you feel like you have to. And it's about stepping back and saying, do I have to play it this much?
No, that's a good way to put it. So we've covered body image, beauty sickness, this pressure, whether, part of it can be related to sort of this inherent sort of tendency that maybe kids were born with versus the media, peer pressure, all of it. What's the answer? What's the remedy? What can parents say or do? And I know this is not a simplistic answer you're going to give, but what can they do to sort of nip it in the bud for kids or teens so that they have less of a likelihood of heading down the wrong road? Are there any tips that listeners might be able to implement to stop this before it becomes, a really bad situation?
It's so hard, right? Because it's this big problem that we didn't create. And yet
Right.
we're left with just these small individual steps to try to fight it. But I do think there are things you can do in your own household to make things a little better. And one is, I always say, get your own house in order. If you as a parent have body image struggles, that's okay. Lots of people do, but your kids don't need to be hearing that, right? They don't need to be hearing you say negative things about your body all the time. So the first thing is to try to make your household a place that just really isn't focused on physical appearance, right? That you're really focused on other things. It is such a gift to be able to give your children the time and space to really figure out what matters to them, who they are, what they care about. And every conversation about physical appearance that you don't have, right, leaves the door open for a different conversation. I think that's important to remember, right? When we talk about something a lot, what we're saying is this is what matters. So give your kids some space to talk about other things. I also think it's important not to shame children who are sort of trying to figure out, well, how do I look? How much does it matter? Right? You don't want to just say things like, well, appearance doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, then it's going to matter even more, possibly.
Right. It's just not true.
Yeah,
It's not true. So I think it's important when you start hearing things like that from your kids to just keep the lines of communication open, to ask open-ended questions. So what's going on? What are you thinking about? What brought this up? Instead of just doing what a lot of parents do, which comes from a really good place, but it's just to say, no, you're beautiful, you're perfect, you're gorgeous the way you are, you always will be. I think you're beautiful. One of my research subjects called that mom pretty or mom beautiful. And I didn't get it. I think she was talking about like mom jeans or something. I didn't get it at first, but she's like, no, it's like, of course your mom thinks you're beautiful.
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't say anything about how you'll be treated in the world. It can also really help to let your children see lots of different kinds of bodies, right? So try to get them books and access to media where they're not just seeing this one body shape, one body type, right? Show them that there's this sort of beautiful, amazing diversity to human bodies, and let that just be a natural background in their lives, that they learn about all kinds of bodies. Because it's not fair to just say, how you look doesn't matter, right? How you look affects how you're treated in the world, whether it's your race, your age, your weight, right? All of these things have an impact on how you're treated, but you can work to create a home environment where the underlying message is bodies are different and that's okay.
Fantastic. And for children, teens, any age group at home who may be struggling and parents aren't really sure what to do, is there any sort of time frame or scenario where you would recommend parents maybe reach out for help? I don't know if that's in the form of counseling or just someone to connect with. Is that something that you can speak to?
I mean, maybe I'm biased because I'm a psychologist, but I tend to think if you have access to supportive mental health care, it's not really a danger in reaching out. I think before that, one of the most important things you can do is just try to create an environment where your children will talk to you if they're struggling, where they're willing to let you know what's going on. But I've never talked to a parent who said like, wow, I really wish I, hadn't offered my kid a chance to talk to a counselor. So if you're worried, listen to the part of you that's worried. I think there's a lot of support that can be had out there, and there's no harm in seeking it out, really.
Wonderful advice. Well, thank you so much to Dr. Renee Engeln for spending time with us today to discuss body image. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners as well. Make sure you visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for up-to-date local information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in video and podcast format. I'm Laura Boycourt with Chesapeake Family Life and Third Floor Views. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.